way to describe how it rocks your world.
There was days where you didn't want to get out of bed. It was really hard.
I remember getting to the hospital and being presented with a bag that was filled with hospital cafeteria gift cards, which were so important. You think the chemotherapy or the radiation or the hospital is the expense, but it's taking care of the other children in the household, the meals that you're not home for.
Well, when Kathy invited me to go to a momcology dinner, it really opened the doors for my own healing.
So what I think is really special about support group is you could go in there and feel totally not judged and feel so open to share everything about your life with complete strangers because they know exactly what you're going through.
There's a variety of different ways that you can approach to stimulate or enhance or educate the immune system to be able to fight cancer. One of those ways has been for years bone marrow or what we call hematopoietic stem cell transplantation. And what that is a way that you can give very high doses of chemotherapy and then give the patient a new immune system. And even though it allows us to give very high doses of chemotherapy, patients still relapse. We also have an issue of not finding donors for a lot of patients. So in recent years, the medical community has been applying a new way of doing a transplant in patients that don't have a matched donor. And that's called haploidentical bone marrow or stem cell transplantation. What that is you can use a parent into a child, and we now are able to do those transplants successfully. Research in our laboratory, funded in part by Courtney's Courage over the years, in particular in the last 2 years, we have found that we can improve the way that we do haploidentical transplantation. And what we have shown in mice is that replacing one drug with another, the mice do not relapse after transplant. So by switching just a single drug, we change the immune system in such a way that it prevents the relapse.
I think the day that your child is diagnosed with cancer is a day that you'll never forget, even though you really want to. Jude was 18 months old and he was diagnosed at his well-child checkup. And the checkup was just about over. And the doctor was leaving and I said, oh, I have one more question. And Jude had some bruising on his legs. And the doctor came over and looked at it and then felt his liver and his spleen, which I now know can become enlarged when you have leukemia. And the second he felt it, he looked up at me and looked like he was looking at a ghost. And within 24 hours, Jude had had his port placed, through which he would receive chemotherapy, and had started getting a spinal tap and getting chemotherapy to his spinal fluid. If this all had been rewound 5 years ago, and Jude had been going through this 5 years ago, he wouldn't be alive today. He relapsed after his first bone marrow transplant, and he relapsed very early. And as of a couple years ago, there was no other options. Our only option would have been for him to go into hospice. But he was actually able to participate in 2 different clinical trials. So Jude was able to get into remission and do a second bone marrow transplant, which is just really incredible, and not many children get that chance. We stayed here in Tucson this time, and Dr. Katsanis is our transplant doctor. And as of today, Jude is day plus 30 from his bone marrow transplant.
Having the Courtney Page Zillman Fellowship means so much to me. It's given me the opportunity to do the research that I do and kind of give me autonomy over my research project. It helps me a lot, just day-to-day, being able to not really worry where the money is coming from. I kind of just get to work and focus on my research project, and it's for such a great cause. I mean, helping these kids and doing research to try to help these kids means so much to me, and the Courtney Page Zillman Fellowship really helps me do that.
I was first diagnosed at age 12 in 1996, and it was very dramatic at that young of age. I had very little experience with hospitals, riding in an ambulance for the first time, being in ICU for 3 days, having blood taken from every part of your body, over so many days was just very traumatizing for me at being so young, and I just didn't know what was going on. After the chemotherapy, after the amphotericin, I was finally able to be admitted to the bone marrow transplant ward at UMC. And there, for a bone marrow transplant, I had a perfect match in my brother, who was my donor. Bone marrow transplants, for a lack of a better description, is basically where the doctors do their best to get your counts to 0 in order to intravenously give you the new bone marrow to take over and start making new cells. So that was a very trying time for me and my family. There was one night in particular that it was expected that I would not make it through the night, and I remember that very vividly, even though a lot of it was a blur, and pastors and family members were there consulting my parents, and thankfully, I was able to wake up the next morning and kind of start my recovery from there. In January of 2002, almost 5 years from my remission mark, I was re-diagnosed with acute lymphatic leukemia. The same diagnosis that happened to me at age 12 was happening to me again at age 16, almost 17 years old. May of 2002, I get my second transplant, considered remission. I graduate high school in 2003, and I attend Grand Canyon University in 2004, the spring of 2004. There, I ended up meeting my wife. I felt compelled to tell her about the fact that I could not have biological children myself, because I knew that that was a burden and threw a lot of complexity into any relationship. And it came out with that story that she herself was actually born from infertility. Her parents needed a sperm donor to have kids back in the 80s when she was born, so she knew exactly what our kids would go through if we took that route, which we did. Having our kids, we had 4 kids now, all through infertility. My advice for anybody that's been diagnosed for cancer, first and foremost, when you're going through it, something my doctor would always tell me is that this too shall pass. And that's really hard to hold on to when you're in the middle of the storm, but it's something to hold on to nevertheless, and it really is the truth. Everything in life will pass, the hard with the good. I am very blessed, celebrating 13 years of being in remission now.
Use the services around you. Use the services at like TUFT for Tots, and use the other Make-A-Wish and all of those, because those people really do know what's, if anybody, what you're going through, and you just need to, reach out. You can't do it alone. And keep communications with your family open.
And there's always hope.
Mm-hmm.
There's always hope.
About 10 years ago, I was kind of soul searching a little bit, and I needed to do something to give back. And I wanted to be something with kids. I'd been a Little League coach for a while, and that was fun. And I wanted to do a little bit more if I could. So I was asking around, and I happened to have a friend at the time named Steve Crooks, who was working with TUFT for Tots at the time. And it soon to become Courtney's Courage, but we called it TUFT for Tots at the time. And he said, hey, if you're looking for something, hey, why don't you come talk to Mr. Jerry Zillman and see what you think about our charity. So I was fortunate to go and meet him, and he told me his story about his little girl that he lost at 4 years old. And I had a little boy at the time. I thought, hey, that's something I might want to work with and help out. It's a tragedy. Cancer's a tough thing, obviously. A lot of people are affected by it. And you hate to see anybody lose their life from cancer, but when you're talking about little kids, that hits hard.